This is the Dallas Morning News.
This episode is brought to you in partnership by Clay Cooley Automotive, family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years. Clay, thank you for all you're doing to make intersections possible. Headquartered in Dallas, Texas, Arcus Golf is a premier owner and operator of nearly 90 private, resort, and daily fee courses in the U.S., including Cowboys Golf Club, the world's first and only NFL-themed golf club, and 8 other courses right here in the DFW Metroplex. Arcus is an innovative industry leader providing unrivaled lifestyle amenities that complement exceptional golf offerings. To learn more, visit arcusgolf.com, and thank you to the Arcus team for all that you do to make intersections happen.
Jim Key, some fascinating stories. Blockbuster days, seeing how kind of that evolved and then ran into a wall. 7-Eleven transforming that. But I got to tell you, the education stories at the end, talking about somebody that actually wants to do something to improve our education system. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah. You described him as a servant leader to begin, and I think that was a perfect, very apt description. He had a difficult childhood and a growing up period, but he really made his life because he got educated. And obviously, that's what we ended with today. Fascinating, really in-depth look at 2 major organizations that he led, Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. Really great listen.
Great stories. They were fun to listen to, the stories there, and then learn a little bit more about him as an individual and the stories there.
Yeah. Enjoy the episode. Tune in. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, introduce our guest.
Jim Case. Jim is probably the epitome of servant leader to me. Jim has been CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies, incredible runs at those, been involved in a number of different community activities from the American Red Cross to local ones here in Dallas. But I think really stands out more than anything else is a commitment over decades to education. So we're going to go through all this. It'll be a fascinating conversation.
Really fun.
Jim, I think the most interesting thing, though, and we appreciate you being here, is talk a little bit about your childhood, because in so many ways, it was really the foundation for the success business-wise, but also your commitment to education. So I don't think we can talk about those with without establishing that foundation.
Well, Tom, I I just got back from Ghana, where I had an opportunity to speak to 10,000 entrepreneurs, and I started with my story. And I said, it's hard for me to talk about growing up in poverty when I'm here in Africa. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's a bit humbling, but I said, there's one thing I can say, that none of you had to get up in the middle of the night and shovel snow to go to your outhouse. and it was pretty well received because, I grew up in Massachusetts and in a 3-room shack. You think of Massachusetts as very urban, but you get 40 miles, 50 miles west of Boston, it gets really rural, really fast.
No plumbing, no electricity.
No, and it was one of those things. My grandfather was in the city with a big family. He had 4 boys and a couple of girls, and he wanted to get out of the city. So he bought a piece of land in Grafton, Massachusetts, and he and his sons built their homes. Well, my dad's home, on a piece of land, my dad's home was pretty simple. It was literally 3 rooms, a living room, a 1 bedroom, and a kitchen. And he intended to have indoor plumbing, but never got around to it. And we had 6 kids in the family, so it was literally 6 kids in 1 bedroom. When I came along many years after my siblings, I was literally the first 5 years of my life sleeping on a pull-out couch with my mom and dad in the living room with a wood-burning stove.
Wow.
So, it was interesting. But, it was children don't know poverty. They don't know problems. To me, it was an adventure. I grew up with my friends being on the other side of town, who had very fine houses. They're some of the people who owned the factories that my dad worked with were on the other side of town. And I'd play at their houses, and they had these fabulous game rooms. And I just remember it being warm and the smell of breakfast and toast in the morning. But they liked to play at my house because we had junk cars. My dad would let people bring their junk cars over to the house, and then he would strip them down and bring them to the scrap metal place and sell scrap metal to make a little extra money. But for us, for kids, what's more fun? Crawling around a bunch of junk cars and pretending you're on a road trip, or playing in somebody's fancy game room. So to me, it was an adventure.
Neither parent educated, both worked in factories.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your parents. I know you lost your father relatively early on too.
Yeah, sadly, the poverty wasn't really the thing. It was the disruption that I faced. My mom and dad never made it past the 6th grade. Both of them grew up in kind of challenging backgrounds, and they didn't understand how to get to school, how to use education. But both of them understood the importance of education. And both used to strongly recommend, we don't know what to tell you, but somehow in those books is knowledge. And my dad kind of fatalistically said, we've heard this from other people before, but they can take your money, they can take your car, they can take your house. They did. Literally, my house was condemned. Walking home from school one day, I saw a red sign on the door. Had to look up the word condemned. And
How old were you?
I was 11 at the time.
Wow.
My mom had left when I was 5. She went upscale to the trailer park, met some guy, went to the trailer park because they had running water. And my dad ended up with cancer, and visiting nurses would come to the house to care for him when he was ill, and they reported the conditions we were living in, which were pretty stark. And sure enough, the town condemned the house, and he was shipped off to a VA hospital, and I was shipped off to a sibling who had just gotten married. They had the pleasure of having a little kid now. So it was just constant disruption.
So what did that disruption do to you, both from a mindset standpoint, but also setting the foundation for clearly the successes later in your life?
Yeah, well, here's what I tell people. I say, I've coined the expression change equals opportunity, because my life was constant change, disruption, upsetting stuff. But I realized even as a little kid, there's nothing I can do about the circumstances I was born into.
Right.
And there's nothing I can do about my parents and dysfunctional family issues. But there's everything I can do with the way I respond to it. And that was the difference. I had maybe the advantage of being the last in among my siblings, the youngest. And so I saw their reaction to disruption, and they became too often the victim. I'm a victim of my circumstances. I can't go to college because we don't have the money. And I'm not going to be able to do anything with my life. I'm going to go to work in the factory because that's all there is. That's who I am.
Is that where your siblings went?
Yeah, a combination of things, going to work going to trade school and then off to a factory job, or one brother became a truck driver. And in context, it's very difficult because they may watch this podcast, but in context, they have good lives. There's nothing wrong with any of their career paths or anything. It's just that the one difference is not money. Yes, I have more money. Mm-hmm. I have freedom. And that's what my dad used to drill into my head, that, son, it's not about making money. Anybody can go make money. But you want to know as much as you can, because the more you know, the more freedom you'll have. And
talk about that more, Jim. You've coined education as freedom.
Yes.
You coined it as a phrase.
Yes.
It was the organization that you founded, put roughly
25 years ago. Yeah.
A lot of money, nearly $500 million into education under that. And then it was the title of a book that you've done too.
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about the mindset of how education, you really relate it to liberty.
I do. And to some extent, it was a bit of an epiphany. I had just graduated, well, not just graduated, but I had graduated from Columbia Business School. Mm-hmm. And I was invited back to teach a class on leadership. And I'm walking on campus and I'm all dressed in a fancy suit and feeling pretty proud of myself. I thought, wow, man, I really made it. I was at 7-Eleven at the time. May have been CFO or something like that at the time. And I saw a kid walking toward me. And it was an African-American kid wearing a T-shirt and an armful of books. And he reminded me of me when I was there. Because I had no money. I was starving. And I just kind of chuckled to myself as he walked toward me, and I'm walking with a briefcase and a suit. And I saw his T-shirt, and his T-shirt said, "Education is freedom." And I literally stopped him in his tracks, and I shook his hand, and I said, "Dude, I am you. That is me. Education is freedom, man. I was here 10 years ago, and I'm coming back to teach a class, but I just learned something from your T-shirt." And so I went into that class and I literally told this group of business students, I said, I just had an epiphany. So when I was here, I thought it was all about money, because that's what you do. You're in business school. You're out to make money. Right. I said, a kid in a T-shirt just reminded me that it wasn't about money at all. It's about freedom. And I have more freedom today than I ever believed I'd have in my life. And the second thing I learned is that I thought I was done with my education when I left there. MBA, blah, 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 right? I said, I've realized that was a license to learn. I have to keep learning if I want to
keep going,
keep growing and enjoy more and more freedom.
So bridge the gap for us a little bit. You talk about your growing up, but you go to Holy Cross. So kind of talk us through how'd you get there? And then let's get into the Columbia side too.
Yeah, we all, first of all, no one, my guidance counselor said, you can't afford to go to college. They were recommending, there was a local community college that they were recommending. And meanwhile, I had teachers that were really encouraging me because I was getting pretty good grades and working. I wasn't smarter than anybody else, but I may have outworked everybody else when it came to studying. And the best school that we had locally was Holy Cross that I knew of. And so I ended up being encouraged to apply. I literally couldn't afford the applications because they were like, I don't know, $25 at the time. It was a lot of money. And so I thought, well, Holy Cross has an early admission, and I'll try, and I'll spend the $25 on that, and maybe they let me in by some miracle. And they did. And so I literally applied to no other schools. Now, in hindsight, that's crazy because I probably could have gotten a full boat at Harvard, given my background, and I was playing sports and doing all kinds of stuff. But I didn't know any better. So I applied to the best school that I could get into where maybe I can work hard enough to pay for the tuition, but I can live at home so I won't have room and board costs. And that was my logic at the time.
But you did work at McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
All the way through.
Yeah.
I did.
So talk about that experience, but also relate that McDonald's experience to later on. You're responsible now for 7-Eleven, who's got thousands of these stores with a lot of parallels to McDonald's in terms of front-facing customers, et cetera, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, the first and most important learning was that most of my peers didn't really feel like working very hard. Yeah. It's an hourly job, and people were just not taking it very seriously. I needed the money, and I needed the job. So if they asked me to pick up the lot, I'd run in a quarter mile each way.
Yeah.
I was training, playing football and baseball, and didn't hurt anyway. It was a little exercise at the same time. But the harder I worked.
So you're Holy Cross, you're 3 sports,
and
you're McDonald's.
Yeah. And driving a truck.
We'll talk about work ethic later. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was a little obsessive. My high school yearbook thing was, if I rest, I'll rust. Someone wrote that for me. It kind of still sticks today. But yeah, I realized that hard work pays off because I was rewarded. They ended up making me a shift manager at like 16 years old because I was fast on the grill and really working hard, and became a shift manager. And what I didn't realize at the time is the similarities between people poo-poo these small franchise jobs, a single store operation, a McDonald's, a dry cleaner, a 7-Eleven. But what I realized as a shift manager, I had inventory management, I had cash management, I had employee issues, I had
You're running a
staff.
business.
I'm running a business. It was a couple $1 million business right there, and I'm responsible for it. So dial forward, I'd be CEO of 7-Eleven, and I didn't realize this until I got to 7-Eleven. I said, it's not that different. It's a few decimal points. But running a business is running a business. So it was great training.
And what did the people that you worked with teach you? Did they teach you anything? Were there any valuable lessons, or were you just like so heads down, laser focused on your own world and making money?
No, I had a lot of good lessons. I mean, one of the very strong benefits of working at McDonald's is a couple of kids from Holy Cross were at McDonald's, and they were working their way through school. And I was able to get some confidence from them that, hey, this is possible. I can make enough money here that I actually can afford to go to school. So yeah, and you always learn from your team.
So you graduated Holy Cross.
Yeah,
I've got to go back and ask two questions. One, what do your siblings? How do they look at you today? Because again, a very different trajectory.
Yeah,
one that, to be frank with you, few people have in life, and you've enjoyed that. How do your siblings look at you today?
Well, first of all, from my perspective, I lead a blessed life because, I am grateful every day that I wake up for what I've been able to do. But my siblings, it's kind of funny that you should say that because they have different perspectives. A couple of siblings always looked at me as being lucky. And they'll say it today. Jim won the lottery. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait a minute.
Let me think the hours at McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of worked pretty hard to get this, but it's just like you just got lucky. And then other siblings and I think they're all proud of what I've accomplished, and we're all very close still. But I think that there's a difference there between the siblings who realize how much work I put in and that I basically accomplished this on my own versus just got lucky.
Yeah.
I guess that leads to my second question, though. Clearly a very tough childhood.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of environment, parents, losing parents, all of a sudden being thrust out of a home, those sorts of things. A lot of people go through very difficult situations in their childhood too.
Yeah.
What set you apart?
Mm-hmm.
What was it that, again, a lot of people don't get out of that?
Yeah.
What was it that led you to a very different path, or said a different way, what leads to so much difficulty for a lot of people to be able to break those bonds, to think about that freedom, that liberty?
Well, I could attribute it to persistence. As you know, Tom, I'm pretty persistent.
I can testify to that. I can testify to that.
A dog with a bone sometimes.
Mountain lion with pride.
But here's what I kind of attribute it to. There's two things that I describe as knowledge, and somehow I learned that the more I learn, the more confident I can be, whether it's playing baseball or taking a test. The more preparation I have, the more confident I can be in going in. So I have a tremendous amount of confidence that I can learn my way out of everything. But I also had kind of the blessing of two parents with very different forms of faith. My dad was a Baptist. My mom was a Catholic. Very, sort of different points of view. But I grew up with my dad, as you know, and saw him go through his crisis with cancer and in and out of hospitals. But I would sit next to him in church and see his faith and the way he handled that crisis, that it wasn't his, fault. It was just, I'm going to deal with it and I'm going to keep my head up. He was very positive through that whole process. It's a great lesson. And then I had the advantage of when I went back to live with my mom after my dad passed to get exposure to the Catholic faith. So ended up converting to Catholicism. That combination of two different views of faith gave me a very personal approach to spirituality. And here's what I define it as, basically, that the combination of knowledge and faith is like a double set of armor that gives me absolute fearlessness. Because what I don't know, I can learn. And what I can't learn because we don't know, I rely on my faith to get me through.
Yeah.
So with those two things, what do I have to be afraid of?
So
Absolutely
where's your faith
nothing.
journey today? Where's your faith journey today?
Well, it's evolved. It continues to evolve. I'm still a Catholic, but I'm also very, very grateful for exposure to other faith-based groups. I've been spending time in the Middle East, learning a lot more about Islam. In fact, I'll be speaking to a group of 5,000 down in Houston shortly. I've been doing some events with my Jewish friends in their faith-based group. There's a group called Dynasty that I've spoken, been a keynote speaker
with education being the common theme through each of these groups.
Being the common theme. But here's what Pope John Paul had a saying that I've been using in every one of these faith-based groups that I talk to. He said that he wrote a piece called Fide e Ratio, faith and reason. And what he described it as, being a pilot, I love this, it's two wings. And if one wing is out of balance, you're going to fly around in circles. So he described it as faith and reason or knowledge are like two wings that elevate the human spirit to seek truth. And I love that because that concept, I used it in Kuwait with a YPO group and in Saudi Arabia. And in Kuwait, a gentleman stood up. His name was Sheikh Mubarak. And he stood up and said, "May I read you a passage from the Quran?" And I said, "Sure." And he read a passage from the Quran basically that said that if you can't overcome your own fear, even Allah can't help you with that. And that's the essence of this, that faith and reason are the way to overcome our own insecurities and our own fear. And every religion has that in common. The Bible says 365 times, do not be afraid.
Yep.
Quran 170 times, Torah 120 times. And yet all of these faith-based groups suffer from the same challenge that the faithful are often still afraid.
Fallen people.
Why?
So
yeah.
Did your faith play a role as you stepped into business leadership roles?
It did, and it, it's kind of funny now because I'm out speaking to faith-based groups. I never would have seen myself because as a corporate executive, you're not going to wear it on your sleeve, right? But it was always something that was there, and it helped me get through some of those really difficult times when you face uncertainty. As I said, you can learn your way out of any problem, except now I've got an activist shareholder. I can't learn my way out of this problem. What am I going to do? And that's when you fall back on your faith and have the strength to do the right thing. Because I think it was Peter Drucker that said the difference between management and leadership is managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing.
Yeah. It was Drucker. Absolutely,
Yeah.
It was Drucker. Okay, so Holy Cross. Then you go on to Columbia.
Yep.
Why business school? Why Columbia? And at that point, what did you think you were going to do after you left?
No idea. I wish I could say, oh yeah, I grew up wanting to be a CEO. No, I didn't know what a CEO did. I wanted nothing to do with business. That was factory work in my mind. No frame of reference, no worldview. So I studied political science. I was going to be a lawyer.
Liberal arts, yeah.
Only two things I knew, lawyer, doctor. Those are two professions, right? So I was going to be a lawyer, and I had a professor in history. He was like one of those paper chase guys, tough guy, history professor, taught me to write. I had him for a couple of years, and he said, Keys, where are you going to go to school? And I said, well, I just got accepted into Villanova and a couple of other law schools. And he said,
Law schools.
yeah.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to be a lawyer? And I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to poli-sci. I'm going to be a lawyer. He said, you can't do that. He said, you're going to make a terrible lawyer.
Oh my God.
He did. It was blunt. He was just one of those really tough guys. And he got right in my face and said, you are not going to do that. You're going to go to business
So why
school.
did he think you were going to be a lousy lawyer?
Just it's observing me in class and style and interests, and maybe thought I was too ADD to be, spending my life in contracts or something. Probably. But yeah, so he recommended, literally, he said, look, do me a favor, at least get a JD MBA. That gives you the ability to pivot. Really important advice. And I didn't know, I knew nothing about MBA. I didn't know how to spell it, literally. I was single focus. So he said, look, there's this Columbia University. It's got a joint degree program. You knock it out in 4 years. Instead of 3, you do 4, get it done. And that'll give you flexibility. And I took his advice and I applied to Columbia, never thinking I would get in. Business school accepted me. Law school waitlisted me. So I said, well, I'm starving to death. I got to get this over with. I'll do it backwards. I'll start at the B school. And ended up at the B school, got an internship, got a full-time offer from Gulf Oil. Never looked back.
So why Gulf Oil? Did you intend to go into the, oil business?
No. I was literally looking at the wall of all the internships.
I needed a job.
I needed a job.
One. Yeah.
I'm going to apply for all of them. And I didn't even read the details that you needed to be an engineer.
First one to say yes, the winner.
First one to say yes, I got an interview. So I sent in the interview and he looks at my resume. He says, didn't you read the instructions? You're supposed to be an engineer. You're a political science major. I was like, well, I got 45 minutes. You want to talk? And at the end of the interview, it turns out he offered me a job.
And what was the first job? What was it?
It was an internship in Houston, Texas with Gulf Oil in their lube department. And my logic was, you get a company full of engineers. You need somebody with different background.
Yeah.
It worked.
And you did that for 5 years and then stayed within the industry, but jumped over to Citgo, which was owned by 7-Eleven.
Yeah, it was actually it's kind of a fun story. The reason I got a full-time job is I did not take this internship seriously, but I worked really hard. And at the end of the summer, I was invited to lunch with the chairman and the CEO of Gulf, Jerry McAfee and Jimmy Lee. They were kind of famous at the time.
Yeah.
Huh.
And we went around the table and they said to everyone, all these interns, well, how was your summer? And everyone was going, oh, it was wonderful. I had, because they're sucking up. They're trying to get a job,
Exactly.
right? I said, because the papers at the time were full of Boone Pickens and Carl Icahn going after Texaco and ultimately Gulf, saying that the oil companies were fat and bloated and, inefficient and they weren't looking out for shareholder value. So I said, as I walk around the offices after lunch, I see a lot of people falling asleep behind their Wall Street Journal after their 2-martini lunch. I think you might have a G&A opportunity. I don't know how I had the guts to do that. You could hear the air get sucked out of me.
So what was the look on their faces?
Their faces were very serious. Everybody else was incredulous that I would say something crazy like this. But Jimmy Lee, after the meeting, took me aside and said, hey, kid, what are you going to do after this? And I said, well, I'm thinking about going to law school. He said, go back, finish the MBA, and come to work for us. We'll give you a full-time job. And they literally hired me to work in the M&A group and eventually to do G&A reductions.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting.
And I assume you found it as a target-rich environment.
It was a target-rich environment. It was a lot of low-hanging fruit in that opportunity. But it turned out to be a great opportunity because by the time I got to 7-Eleven, which was because 7-Eleven had acquired Citgo,
Yeah.
ironically, I was working on Citgo Petroleum. That's what Week in the Gulf was, the attempted acquisition of City Service.
Yeah.
And so I had all this knowledge of City Service, of Citgo Petroleum, and the downstream. 7-Eleven acquires them, and they needed a team to come in. So they hired a gentleman from Gulf to be CEO of Citgo, and he brought me in to be head of strategic planning
Got it.
for Citgo.
Huh.
And
And what years were this?
this was 1982-ish, 1983.
But how at that point you come in as kind of the oil and gas guy, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then you transition out, a little bit over a decade, to then become senior executive within 7-Eleven, and most of that focus, of course, the core is the stores.
Yeah.
How did that take place?
Well, it really was a very interesting journey because, first of all, we sold Citgo, turned it around, and sold it to PDVSA, the Petróleos de Venezuela, the government
Yeah,
oil
I think
company.
we've seen them in the news lately.
Yeah, I know. I know. They were fascinating to work with, by the way, incredibly professional.
And to be fair, it was a different Venezuela.
totally
than it is
different.
That
today.
was pre-Chavez, yeah. And so we sold the company to them, and the Thompsons, Jerry and John, asked me to stay with 7-Eleven and lead the retail gasoline business. Now, I'm a kid right out of grad school. I know nothing about operations, retail gasoline. I'm just an analyst. But to them, I was an oil company guy, right?
Yeah.
So they gave me the privilege of running what was like a $2 billion operating company, the retail gasoline business. And right about that time, they do an LBO, 1987. Take the company private, $4 billion at 17% interest. It's hard to even imagine today. So they take the company private, and it was just a matter of time. By 1991, we were running negative same-store sales during that period of time. The gasoline division was booming. So we were blowing away our numbers with some basic changes in the business. We were basically using data to make better pricing decisions, and it worked. And meanwhile, the rest of the business was really struggling. So we filed for bankruptcy. And here's the way I characterize it. I coined that expression, change equals opportunity. Well, all that change that I had to deal with my whole life that had me keep my head up, right? Everybody during bankruptcy's head down, woe is me, I'm a victim.
And here's
I'm like, here we go.
This is my chance.
Hold my beer.
Right.
Yeah. We came out of the bankruptcy, and I was given the privilege of being head of strategic planning. Don't know what you did for gasoline, but it seemed to work.
might as well try it here.
Do it for the rest of the business. Yeah. So I got to I had the privilege of building the strategic plan for the new 7-Eleven. So that change equals opportunity, which, by the way, is the acronym CEO, was good for me because it ended up getting my career a boost, but it was good for the company because we needed to reinvent the company. So that change really was truly opportunity for both the Southland Corporation and for Jim Keyes.
So how did you jump into the C-suite and then eventually COO to CEO?
Well, the role of strategic planning ended up getting me an opportunity to be CFO. Now, why does a kid with a poli-sci background get to be CFO? I went home.
But you did have the MBA from Columbia, so.
But I only had one accounting course. In fact, when they named me CFO, I went home and said, "Where's that accounting book?
Yeah.
There's a debit
I
on
gotta
the
find
left and credit on. I don't remember. I knew I was in deep trouble. So I
Maybe not SEC audit certified. Huh?
Thank goodness I had a really good audit partner at PwC and a really good controller, so they kept me out of trouble. But yeah, I became CFO, and remember the story I told you about cutting G&A? Well, we had just emerged from bankruptcy. We're a former public company. We've still got weight. We had 12 jets at one point and an FBO facility with like 20 airplanes or something like that. No, I would have 12 jets. And the FBO at Love Field, which is now I think Signature, was
Oh, yeah.
the old 7-Eleven
7-Eleven.
FBO.
Yeah.
We had lots of overhead. So I was stepping up from my planning role saying, here's what we have to do to improve the balance sheet
Sure.
and improve our cost structure. And they gave me the chance to be CFO to give me a shot at right-sizing the company, basically. So I was not an accounting like CFO. I was more of a strategic CFO.
And then how did you end up in the corner office?
Well, and that led to a role as chief operating officer. And I guess here's the difference. People get stuck, and they have fear of change.
Mhm.
And we had so much history and so many people with so much history of what 7-Eleven was that we emerged from bankruptcy with a Japanese partner, a licensee of 7-Eleven Japan. I'm going over there seeing that they have restaurant quality sushi
Mhm.
in their stores. They had used technology to completely transform the business. So I was the wide-eyed kid, teach me, let me learn. I learned Japanese so I
So
could
you really took a lot just from your
understand.
partners then and kind of watching them and bringing it over to this side of the world.
A ton, yeah. I saw that as just a learning-rich environment because they had been so successful with reinventing the business. So I just wanted to learn.
Well, and give us a few specifics on some of that technology that you implemented.
Well, it's ridiculously simple. They had a word for it in Japanese called tampin kandi, which roughly translates into item-by-item management. Contrast that to the United States, we had no data. We had old, dumb cash registers, no data warehouse.
Hmm.
We had no idea what we sold. Vendors made all the decisions on
Yeah.
the store. We were basically renting shelf space to Coke and Pepsi and Frito-Lay. I looked at them, and they had every store by SKU. They could tell you what hour of day that sold out, and make a very informed decision about tomorrow's
And
order.
real-time inventory
Real
management.
time.
Yeah.
Real time, just in time, going all the way back through their supply chain to the manufacturing process, the distribution. They were doing 3 times a day delivery of fresh foods. We were at once a week. Yeah, and it was shocking the difference. So I just copied the heck out of their system, brought it back over here, built a nationwide network of commissaries and daily delivery systems, and had the data now in every store to manage every SKU by day.
That's the technology, but you received a lot of credit for being out in the stores and stores that were known, what's the nice word? Not
They're a little rough.
Cleanliness may
Yeah,
not
they're a little
have been
rough.
what you would do.
Slurpees, spilled Slurpees make sticky floors.
Yes. But you pushed hard on just kind of the basics. And again, I assume you walk into the store, you can see that, the Slurpee, et cetera,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. My question's not that. My question, though, is you've got thousands of stores, thousands of people. That's the way that they have operated for a period of time.
Yeah.
So how do you change that mindset? You can see, this is dirty, I got to clean it up, customers don't like it, et cetera, et cetera. But understanding that and making it happen in an organization that is widespread as 7-Eleven, how did you do that?
Yeah, I took a lesson from Sam Walton because Sam Walton, I saw, I don't know if you remember this, but he used to bring everybody from all over the country. They had a small air force of twin-engine airplanes, and they would bring everyone to Bentonville every Saturday.
Saturday morning. I've been in the Saturday morning meetings.
So you know it, right? With the clappers and the whole thing. It was like a sales rally.
It's true, yeah.
But here's what he tried to do. I had 12 layers of management between me as CEO and the store. That's 12 chances to misinterpret what you're trying to accomplish. I describe it as that kid game telephone where you sit around a campfire and you whisper into somebody's ear.
Sure.
That's management. And the bigger the company gets, the worse that miscommunication gets.
The mouse in the tent, by the time you get done, turns into the bear destroying it.
Exactly. That's management. And so I thought, how can I cut through those layers with communications? So I took advantage of technology. At the time, it was, you remember AT&T had put together the telecom services with a little box you'd stick on a desk in the boardroom. So we linked the largest telecom network ever, I think, at the time with AT&T's partnership. And I'd do a weekly call with every field operation.
Yeah, with the stores.
And say, here are the 3 priorities for the week. And that then evolved into a video. Now, we didn't have Zoom back then, but we put cameras and TVs and monitors in, and we did a video conference. So what I found is that by establishing 3 priorities for the week, I could go into any store in the country and say, hey, what are we trying to accomplish this week? Mm-hmm. Well, sir, we have a new product. We have cleanliness is on our agenda this week, and customer service. We're going to do some suggestive selling. But they could echo back.
So you as CEO go straight down,
straight to
store. Each store's got 3 priorities. Communicate that, and then basically check it
straight to point of sale. Yep.
Pretty simple.
Yep. And it just cuts through the clutter and simplifies management communication. But Tom, there's another really important point, because all businesses tend to get lazy. Retailers, stores get dirty. I saw an excuse because people would say, it's our demographic. They don't care. And the most stark example, I used to do night store rides. So call up the team. Oh, no. He wants to go to the night store rides again. We went to Oak Cliff one night, and the stores were abysmal. They were rough, really, really rough. And I said, okay, this is unacceptable. We're going to clean up these stores. We're going to spend the money. We're going to do paint. We're going to do imaging, new lighting. And everybody was, oh, no, you don't understand. That demographic, it's not going to work. We're going to be wasting our money over there. And here's what happened. We invested the money, cleaned up the stores. Sales took off. And you know what the customers did? They protected their own stores. We didn't have people on the dock begging for money. The customers were keeping that store.
They had pride in it.
They had pride in their store. Yeah. And it was such a big lesson for me. And again, it's one of those advantages of growing up the way I grew up. It's like, wait, I'm not different just because I'm a different demographic.
You sent a signal to customers, employees, et cetera, that this is special.
Yeah.
One that you cared about them.
Yeah.
I mean, that you wanted to invest in them.
Yeah.
That's the culture that, but I got to go back. 7-Eleven, so Thompson's were in ownership, controlled it with very strong hands. Then it goes into bankruptcy. You've got all the debt. Then it comes out. Japanese come in. That's a lot of cultural change.
A lot of cultural change. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, again, the cultural change, I call it cultural literacy. I had another advantage in my developmental life, academic life. I earned a scholarship to go to London. And you got to bear with me with my story, but I end up in London thinking they're going to love me. And I only went because I got a scholarship and I was starving. They're going to love me. I'm an American.
Way to get food.
Yeah, and I get to eat, and I get to London, and they hated me. It was horrible. I was like, wait, I'm here. They all speak English, and I'm an American. I should be cool. Doesn't everybody love America? And they didn't like me, and so a group of kids embraced my difference. It was my Pakistani friends, my Indian friends, and they said, kid, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're in London. You got to learn our ways. You're a baseball player. Let us teach you cricket. Because they called baseball rounders. The girls played baseball. So they taught me cricket. We're playing cricket in the halls during the winter, right? And they taught me when I go to a pub to sit and talk. I couldn't do that as American. I had to be playing pinball or darts. I was not a talker. Right? But they wanted discussions. So I learned to assimilate. And at the end of that experience, well, first of all, they brought me out to cricket, and you know how confidence is such a big part of sports. I'm thinking, the bat's this wide, a ball bounces once. How hard can this be? I'm playing ball in college. I could hit a curveball. I could hit a ball that bounces. And wow, I get 6 runs for a foul ball. This is great. Yeah. So I make the cricket team. I end up going from being like the least popular guy to being like the most popular guy.
Yeah.
And what I learned in that whole process from my Indian and Pakistani friends was cultural literacy. Little did I realize 20 years later, I'd be running a company where my largest franchise group was from Pakistan or India. I'd been to their 4-day weddings. I understood their culture. So when I went to Japan and started doing business, I learned the language, not because I wanted to speak Japanese, because I wanted to learn their culture through their language. And all of those things I characterize as cultural literacy were so important as 7-Eleven went through its various iterations. When we went to China, it was a huge advantage. The Chinese government came to Dallas and asked us to bring 7-Eleven to China. And that cultural literacy was essential in being able to gain their trust.
So then the Japanese, though, acquire all of 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Take it over at that point. You stay on a bit, but then leave shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Walk us through kind of that whole transaction and Jim Key's role in it pre and post.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because we were experiencing some stresses with our Japanese partner. And here's one of the biggest points of stress. They desperately wanted the license for China. We had a Taiwanese licensee, the President's Chain Store Group. We had a Thai licensee, CP 7-Eleven in Thailand, South Korean franchisee, Lotte Group, one of the largest retailers, who, by the way, was a classmate, literally. The CEO of Lotte, Shin Dong-bin, was a classmate of mine at Columbia University.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just small world stuff. Yeah. But all of these licensees were vying for the right to go into China. 7-Eleven Japan desperately wanted China. Well, we're a public company. I can't let them do that. I have to really look at the best options, and they didn't like that alternative. And so literally their prime motivation for buying the company was to be able to then get the rights to China. Let's take it over, and then we can be the licensee for China, which they are today.
They de facto became it when they
became it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
And that was
and you stayed for a while, but then decided to leave.
Yeah, I had 21 years there, and I learned a ton from my Japanese partners. But I also knew that they had a very different style and approach. And as a public company, I could always do what I thought was the best of both the Japanese culture and the American culture and bring them together. And I saw that changing under the new structure, the new ownership structure. So I decided to try something new.
Sure.
But then the penultimate corporate raider gives you a call.
Yeah. Carl says.
No, he didn't call me. Here's how it happened. We had a good run at 7-Eleven, 10x increase.
And what year did you leave, just for the audience?
2005.
Okay.
Yep. And so after 21 years, I'm going to go try something new. Took about a year, started looking at opportunities. I had 2 targets, Radio Shack and Blockbuster. Why those 2 targets? Because I knew the power of technology, and I knew neither of those companies were embracing technology and change. So I had 2 decks in my briefcase, and I was on a roadshow talking to investors. I had private equity backing to say, we'll take one of these companies private. And actually the grand vision, which sounds crazy today, but was to bang the 2 together and create a small box Apple store, if you will, a technology agnostic Apple store. Because if you had Blockbuster and Radio Shack, the largest retailer of cell phones and computers at the time, and the largest content delivery, you bang those 2 together, every cell phone, every computer would come with free movies. And then a pay-per-view option for the new releases would have been the ultimate streaming opportunity. That was the grand vision. And
it's pretty interesting because there really wasn't a streaming.
No one was doing that.
There wasn't streaming, but we knew it was coming. We just didn't know how soon.
Yeah.
But here's 2 companies that could have come together and really facilitated streaming in a big way. I was on the roadshow. I was selling the the Radio Shack plan to an investor, and he said, "Damn," he said, "too bad you don't have that kind of strategy for Blockbuster." And I pulled out my
Well,
Might as
just,
well.
by the way,
just happened to have one right here. Yeah, it was hysterical. Anyway, it was one of those things, and he looks at the Blockbuster plan, and he picks up the phone and calls Carl Icahn. He said, "You got to talk to this guy. I'm going to bring him right by your office." 20 minutes later, I'm in Carl's office, and he's like, he looks at this plan for Blockbuster, and he says, "Who the hell do you think you are?" I said, "Hey, I'm just a
And
guy."
at that time,
guy
was
with an
Carl the
idea."
largest investor in Blockbuster? Okay.
He was the largest investor, and he was kind of giving Blockbuster a bit of a
Yeah,
Of a hard time. Yeah.
I got it. Yeah.
and they may have deserved a little bit of it. So yeah,
but still, financials of Blockbuster still making it hadn't encountered the headwinds of technology and the movement away from the store at that point, right?
they had a little bit, and the previous management team did some things. I never like to disrespect a previous management team, so I won't throw them under the bus. But decisions like eliminating late fees ended up being an $80 million EBITDA hit
Big number.
Yeah.
to the company. It was a big number. And one of the first things I asked is, show me the data. Well, how was that decision made? And the lines never did cross. So the response for the consumer was, thank you,
Sure.
but they didn't come anymore to be able to justify it. So there were some decisions like that. They had, by the time I arrived,
And one of your first decisions was restoring those late fees.
no, it's actually a myth. Yeah, I didn't actually ever bring late fees back. But what happened when we eliminated late fees, people would keep the disc. Well, we were paying $14 for them.
Yeah.
And people say, okay, thanks, no late fee, I'll just keep it.
Yeah.
Well, the new releases, if they're all gone, then you
You didn't have content.
Yeah. You don't have enough content.
Yeah.
So all we did, we didn't really replace late fees, but we put a penalty on and said, basically, you want to keep it, but we're going to charge you for the
Sure.
movie as if you bought it. That was interpreted as bringing back late fees, but it really wasn't. It was just to try to keep our inventory
Yeah, sure.
in place. But the first thing that
So then you're with Carl
yeah.
in his office.
Yeah. And Carl was he was very hands-on and actually quite helpful in the first 2 years. We doubled EBITDA, got back in stock on inventory.
So what are the big decisions that led to that? We just talked about one of them.
Yeah, well, a basic operating blocking and tackling. And, I'm a stores guy, so, improving inventory management, getting in stock on product. The
Kind of a
old
lot
days,
of the same things at 7-Eleven.
it's kind of like what we did at 7-Eleven. Yeah. And Blockbuster in the old days, they had something called, I can't remember, they had a technical term for it, but it was basically planned disappointment. So if you didn't get the new release you wanted from the new release wall, you'd come back.
Huh.
And now that worked for many, many years for Blockbuster. They'd get you back in the
That's how
next
they got you back in the store. Yeah.
Yeah. But in a world of Netflix and DVDs by mail, that didn't work so well anymore. So people were like, it's not in stock. I'll just go subscribe to Netflix.
It's called competition.
Yeah. So Blockbuster also had a DVD by mail, which was good, and it was very competitive to Netflix, but it really wasn't our core business. It was the subscription business. Now, the difference is subscription is kind of the all-you-can-eat buffet, right? You're never going to get New York Strip on the all-you-can-eat buffet. New York Strip is the new releases. New releases are 80% of Blockbuster's DVD rentals. So we were spending a lot of money chasing a business that really wasn't our core business. It was that subscription business. Yes, it would lead eventually to streaming, but nobody was streaming yet.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we did when it came to streaming was to buy a streaming company. We had the
Movie Link.
buy or build. Yeah, so we bought MovieLink. 5 of the 6 major studios created their own entity to prevent what has happened today, which is the fragmentation of the industry. They wanted us to own it because they wanted the pay-per-view option. They sold us the company and 3,000 of the newest titles already digitized. We're ready. Now, the market wasn't. buffering, no devices, no smart TVs, no apps at the time.
And what year was this?
2007.
Okay, so this is pre-GFC.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so, so we had the perfect capability. Now, I'll give you two more pieces of the puzzle that would have completely transformed the way we see movies today. So we had a streaming capability called Movie Link, renamed it Blockbuster On Demand. Now we have true total access that they built before I got there. Stores, by mail, we had kiosks, and we had on demand. Now, next piece of the puzzle. Paramount offers me, or Viacom offers me, a guy named Philippe Dumont was CEO of Viacom. We will put together for you a package for all of the long tail titles exclusively. It's going to be a Blockbuster exclusive. All of that old content, everything but HBO, basically, and Disney. So all of the old movies, and we'll give it to you exclusively for $100 million a year. Now, the board is sitting there going, $100 million to buy exclusive content, but we don't know how many years it will take to monetize this. So that was a bet the farm kind of decision.
And it was $100 million a year.
A year, yeah. Now, Blockbuster's EBITDA, we took from $100 million to like $150 million to $280 or something like that. So we had big increase in EBITDA, but to bet the farm on 100 on that kind of a deal when you don't know if you'll ever monetize it, you don't know how long it will take.
Did you advocate taking the deal to the board?
I advocated taking the deal to the board. The board was more experienced. We had the guy who started Showtime was on the board. A gentleman, a senior exec from Warner on the board. So these guys knew the subscription business, and they said, Jim, we just can't go with this. Now, here's the third leg of the stool. I get a call from Google. A guy named Nikesh Arora said, hey, we got a deal. Studios are beating us up. We bought YouTube. Google had just bought YouTube. We're getting killed by the studios because kids are putting on YouTube movie content. Yep. We got to stop that. So here's the deal. We'll do a JV with you. We will be your distribution partner for all things streaming. We'll go side by side. Blockbuster, everything paid. Movies, TV, YouTube, everything free. Clean break between the two. But we will be your distribution partner, JV structure. My board signs it. Now, that deal would have then given us the chance, the confidence to line up that $100 million commitment.
Sure.
And it's in front of Google. It's at their board, ready to sign. And an article comes out, I think it was in the LA Times.
Oh, yeah.
Said, Blockbuster is about to file for bankruptcy. We weren't. We had hired a law firm to keep us out of bankruptcy, Kirkland & Ellis. I should have hired Haynes & Boone. Kirkland & Ellis was known as a bankruptcy specialist. Haynes & Boone, nobody would have batted
Just
an eyelash.
agnostic, yeah, sure.
Right? But because we hired Kirkland & Ellis, the rumor came out. Of course, someone leaked that rumor. I don't know who might have leaked it, but someone leaked that rumor. And I got the call from Google saying we're not going to be able to do the deal.
Just because of lack of financial confidence in Blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, Google was flying high at the time. They didn't want to do a deal with a company that's about to file for bankruptcy. And it would have been.
You did start heading towards bankruptcy. The world changed. You know, you talked about the debt you had back when.
$1 billion of
You had
debt.
$1 billion debt. Now,
Yeah.
you're used to dealing with debt.
I'm used to dealing with that. No problem. And you know, people say, well, wouldn't you do things differently? Yes. First thing I would have done, taken the company private. That was the plan. Icon talked me out of it.
What was that conversation like?
He says, Keys, you're an operator. I'm a financial guy. I'm behind. I got your back. Don't worry about it. And he did. Until he didn't.
For a while.
Yeah. When Lehman collapsed, he said, there's no hope. You'll never get that $1 billion financed. And so he said, let's just file it. Well, we had just doubled EBITDA.
Yeah.
So I said politely, I'm going to chase strategic deals because I know we'll have a strategic partner, Dish Network, AT&T, Google. He didn't see that. He didn't think we would successfully do that. And he knew we would have a hard time refinancing the debt.
And that's when Key's Icon went.
Yeah. He sold
ways.
his equity. He said, look, all due respect, understand your strategy. I'm going to go a different path. I'm going to sell my equity, get off the board. Now I'm not an insider.
Mm-hmm.
And he bought the cheap debt. And his strategy was when the company does file for bankruptcy.
I take it from the creditor position.
Yeah. Flip
How much did he lose on the equity?
I don't know. I'm not sure how much he lost, but a fair amount, well before I got there.
Mm-hmm.
Most of his losses in the equity were before I arrived. But in his strategy, could work. A lot of people do this. They buy the cheap debt and then they flip the inventory and make a couple $100 million and go away. Yeah. I'm running a public company, and I looked at it and said, I can't do that. I have an obligation to all of the stakeholders.
To your shareholders.
Yeah, and I see a path, so I'm going to take that path. So we had different directions. We actually prevailed. Carl joked about it afterwards because we actually beat him in bankruptcy court. He was trying to liquidate the company. I had 2 strategics left on the table. I had lost Google, but I had Dish Network.
Which eventually was a sale.
Yeah, and Korea Telecom was also in the wings.
Yep.
So I had 2 strategics to keep the company alive versus I had 2 competing debt holders, Carl and another group, that were trying to liquidate the company. But we prevailed in bankruptcy court, Southern District Court, walked out at 2 a.m. Carl was there in person. Walked by me, dropped a couple of expletives, and left.
That was gold.
Yeah. I was in his office the next day with a bottle of scotch, shook hands, laughed about it.
But Blockbuster, during this period of time, for all practical purposes, did go away.
Well, what happened,
Dish Network,
it was another 2 years.
But in the space of 2 years, stores went from large number to minuscule numbers.
Yeah.
Jim, looking back on that, a lot of different factors, some of which we've talked about. The technology changed on you.
Yeah.
The competition was
collapsed.
A very different situation. Yeah. You ended up with a very difficult environment, but you also sat with $1 billion. Now, those last 2 components come together. So when you sit back now and kind of look at it, what do you attribute that to? And is there anything that you go back and say, it could have come out differently if we had done X?
Yeah, so many things. First is take the company private. Second, the first week on the job, I found out the
take
company,
it private just to insulate it.
Oh no, we would have refinanced the debt.
Right, exactly.
In 2007.
Yeah, that's why I say insulate the debt so then you don't have that sitting there as the issue on the public quarterly, et cetera.
Correct, because a third of that $1 billion was due in 2009.
Right.
That's an important detail.
That's important, yeah.
And Lehman collapsed in the third quarter of 2009, of 2008. And so, first thing I would have done, refinance the company. Second thing I would have done, instead of taking it private, I had a chance to restructure the debt in 2007. I didn't because I had the confidence in what we were going to do to improve EBITDA. So the banks gave me forgiveness until 2009.
And you thought you could cover the debt service with the EBITDA or the improved EBITDA.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And refinance at a better rate than we would have faced under duress in 2007. So that I had 2 bites at the apple to refinance the debt, and I passed on both. I would have, if I had a crystal ball, I would have done that all over again. The other thing that I learned, and by the way, the perception that Netflix crushed Blockbuster because they didn't keep up with technology.
Talk about that.
And that's the wild perception. I ask audiences today, what do you think? And 90% will raise their hand.
Netflix won, Blockbuster lost.
Yeah. Blockbuster didn't keep up. Well, Blockbuster all the way back in the year 2000, when Netflix approached them, 7 years before I got there, Blockbuster had to deal with Enron because Enron had more bandwidth than anybody else. They had bought Spectrum. So they were preparing for
That was
streaming.
actually one of the deals that was part of the criminal trial, too.
It was. Exactly. And it would have changed the game because they had all the bandwidth because of their spectrum. So it was a genius deal, but it was way back in 2000. So the perception that Blockbuster—
Let me stop you there. Just kind of a tangential question. Because as that was played in the press and in the trial, was Enron— I think they put $90 to $100 million in earnings in a single quarter based on the Blockbuster deal, but there were no documents. The joint venture had not been created.
Yeah.
You guys had not signed off on it, et cetera. Is that a fair—
Yeah, I wasn't there. That was 7 years before I got there. But it doesn't surprise me that was the case. They were kind of fast and loose with deals back then, Enron and Blockbuster with both. But here's the point. The most important learning here is that there's so much rich learning in the Blockbuster case study that if you attribute it, which Harvard Business School did, Blockbuster didn't keep up with the technology, they lose. You lose all the rich learning of cash management, activist shareholder dealings, supplier communications, and net, it wasn't even the debt that crushed Blockbuster. It was fear. And it was fear among the studios. We only had 6 suppliers. We had 90-day credit terms.
Wow.
Think about the implications of that. Basically, we could buy a movie, rent it 20 times before we ever had to pay for it. Blockbuster was not a cash flow problem. Our stores were pretty much evergreen leases. They weren't really a liability. The problem was the fear of bankruptcy caused one studio to panic and say, we're going to cut your credit terms, put you on cash terms. And when one studio did, the rest fell like dominoes.
And that flipped your economic model.
$300 million in cash availability out of the system. Now my debt is a problem.
Now the debt becomes
Now it becomes insurmountable. Yeah. And it forced us into—
So that threat of bankruptcy, which wouldn't have existed, forced the change in the balance sheet terms, but also lost you the Google deal, et cetera.
Killed the Google deal, forced the change in the balance sheet terms, caused the creditors to pull their credit terms, and now it forced our hand. Yeah.
Okay, so
that's the real story of Blockbuster.
I want to fast forward, same topic.
Yeah.
But Warner Brothers, Netflix, Paramount is a very hot topic today.
It is.
Give us your perspective. Obviously, you didn't deal with necessarily this deal, but you've got perspective on it. Give us your perspective on kind of where that deal stands and what you think's right for the industry.
Yeah, I think the industry has kind of lost its way, and the studios shot themselves in the foot because— I'm going to give you a little primer on how the movie industry works. You make a movie, $500 million on Top Gun. You put it in cinema for 60 to 90 days. You hope you're going to get most of that back, but you may not. So the next
not happening
window—
a lot today.
Right. The next window was that DVD or pay-per-view window, right? That's where they really monetized most of the movies. Not the big blockbusters like Top Gun, but the mainstream movies, Harry Loves Sally, all that stuff that we all loved. And then, only after that, after 6 months, would it go into the all-you-can-eat buffet, the subscription, HBO, Netflix, etc. When the studios killed Blockbuster, basically, because of the fear of bankruptcy, they shot themselves in the foot by killing that DVD rental window, and no one had developed a pay-per-view other than Amazon and who else is out there with pay-per-view?
Well, DirecTV has
DirecTV and Amazon and a couple of others, but they hadn't really developed it. So that pay-per-view window kind of slammed shut. Generates
you lose the revenue there.
You lose the revenue there.
Yep.
So what has happened is the quality of movies has changed. We don't see that mainstream family movie being produced because it's really hard to monetize that anymore. Now, go to the other end of the spectrum and you're Netflix and you're going, oh man, I don't really have enough content to justify the subscription. I have to start making my own. So they took a big risk with House of Cards. They put $100 million bet on House of Cards and won.
Won big.
But that's a very different business. That's not movie distribution, which is what Blockbuster was and what Netflix used to
the
be.
movie distribution, Jim, hasn't that really gone towards the big place? In other words, almost more like the wildcatting business.
It has.
Is where I win is I've got that big winner.
Yep.
Exactly.
And that's the way I need to play it.
Exactly.
And that kind of the idea that I can kind of do 20 movies, make $10 million off of each one, that doesn't work. It's the $100 million, $200 million, $300 million expense movie that then starts returning $500, $600, $700, $800 million.
Exactly. That whole segment has pretty much dried up, which is very frustrating for moviegoers because there's only the big box office. That's why you see so many, Marvel, superhero movies.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either the sequels or the big
exactly.
budget.
Or the binge watching TV shows, basically.
Fascinating business career. You've seen a lot. As I said, you understand debt very well. But through this entire time, Jim, and you spent decades on it. We had a chance to work 20 years ago plus on it. You've really dedicated your life with as much time and effort as you put into all your businesses. It seems to me that your heart, soul, sweat, and tears have gone into education. Talk a little bit about why you got into that, what you've done with EIF, and then we're going to talk about how you assess the American education system today.
Sure. Well, Tom, you remember, because you were working with me at the time, 20, 25 years ago. Actually, you were a fellow CEO at the time. And I was looking at the landscape saying, why do we have so many first-generation Americans in 7-Eleven? Now, that's a good thing, but they were enjoying the American dream. Why aren't more American kids enjoying the American dream? Well, I could relate because I never saw that path to a corporate world. And I thought, well, why can't we put some advisors in these schools in Dallas and help them see the path that, hey, I got a $50,000 store manager job, at least get an associate's degree. And you can have that, and that'll be a better career trajectory.
Move up.
So I partnered with Anheuser-Busch and Al Brew over at Frito-Lay and Jeff Rich at ACS at the time. So we had a bunch of CEOs come together, and we created the Education is Freedom Foundation really as a pipeline from these urban school districts to be able to show students a path to a corporate opportunity. And here's the way I look at it. It's a supply and demand problem. If these were chips, we'd build chip factories. But for some reason in the corporate world, we say, well, that's a government problem. We'll let them fix the schools. But we're the demand. And if we don't have enough demand, we better do something about the supply. That was the inspiration for the Education is Freedom Foundation.
And most CEOs today would tell you, aside from all the challenges of the environment, tariffs of that their biggest concern is really having enough educated people to grow their companies in the future.
Exactly. And it's worse, far worse today than it was 25 years ago when we started this mission. And compounding that is a whole narrative around education is not even important anymore.
Yeah.
So where have you seen it go in 25 years? I mean, you talk about it's far worse. Why?
Yeah, it's a whole host of reasons. And, I blame a lot of this on blame. We're caught up in this cycle of, well, there's nothing you can do because of the teachers union, or there's nothing you can do because, those guys want to do vouchers and, they won't. So there's all this back and forth. And here's my favorite example. A lot of people are really worried about what kids are reading. With 31% functional literacy in the fourth grade,
read anyway.
Yeah, shouldn't we worry about can they read first? And
I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah,
and it really leads then to looking at our American education system. You and I have spent a lot of time on this together. We've got only 30% of kids in the primary level that are at grade level.
Yeah,
and we know from experience that if you're not at grade level, you've got a 2% chance of getting an associate degree, not a bachelor degree.
Right.
If you do an array of the U.S. education system against other OECD countries, we come in roughly third quartile.
Yeah.
Math, reading a little bit different, but roughly third quartile.
Right.
We're not particularly competitive. You and I just went through an exercise of looking at some of the changes with some of our adversaries. We have about 40% of kids that go to college now or go on to college. China, not very long ago, it was single digits. Today it's 61%, with most of those being STEM. A good chunk of our 40% goes into what I'll call non-economic, non-security type of things. How do you look at the education system in terms of its success today, but just as importantly, of what it means to the competitiveness of the United States economy and society in the future?
Well, I think it shouldn't shock us that the current public education system was built on the influence of businesses. Rockefellers and others needed an educated workforce. So everything about it was kind of like production of the Model T. Standardization, mass production of an educated workforce. The bell curve, the bells that announced the class changes all came from the factory floor.
Well, but the calendar came from the agrarian.
Exactly.
We got to
all the way back.
We got
Going
to
way
get the kids out to do the harvest in the summer.
Exactly. So all of these things were built for a different generation and for the industrial age. And now we're still using that same basic method and wondering why the kids aren't learning. So here's the point of view. The good news is it's fixable, I think. But we've got to embrace change. We got to see change as opportunity. Here's the change that I think we can make. We can take what is today 13,000 independent school districts, each with their own systems, their own accountability standard. Everything's completely unique, right? It's almost the same model I used at 7-Eleven. We make the argument that school is local. Well, nothing's more local than a convenience store. I mean, it depends on the corner you're on. The product assortment needs to change from one corner to another. When we finally put an operating system into 7-Eleven, we had the buying power of scale, and we had the data to be more effective locally than we ever were before, because now we had accountability.
Well, and accountability through comparing.
Through comparisons, yeah. And but most importantly, we had data. We didn't know what was selling and what wasn't selling in the past. And the reality is we don't know what kids are in school and what kids are not in school, how they're doing, how they're not doing.
Well, that came out after COVID when we saw big drops and didn't know who they were. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's infinitely fixable. My proposal is to create a federally funded operating system. And with an operating system, here's what you get, basically. You get a platform. It's like an infrastructure. So I'll give you an example. The president just signed an executive order and said, we're going to have AI in all of our schools. We're going to teach kids AI. How? We don't have the infrastructure. It's like saying we're going to have high-speed rail to every city. Oh, but by the way, there's no track laid.
There's no railroad.
We don't have to lay tracks first before we have high-speed rail. So we can build, and the comparison I'll make is when iOS came in, I was clinging to my BlackBerry. Can't have it. No. Until I realized that with an operating system, Apple could invite everybody else to come in. Now I don't just have Apple Maps. I have a choice. I can go to Google Maps. And it's all interoperable. So the three keys are interoperability, privacy, and security. Now, there's a whole lot of fear around this change because people are like, oh my gosh, my kids' data will be out there. Well, healthcare data now has been captured, and I can go to one doctor and another doctor can access those records. And that's finally, we can do that. We have security and privacy available with technology today that didn't exist. We've got to get over the fear because the advantage of data is huge and being able to elevate not just wealthy kids who can afford the best tools, but elevate all kids so we can go truly with what I'm recommending, a JFK moment where a president stands up like JFK did in 1962 at Rice University and said, we're going to put a man on the moon this decade. Why can't we have one of our leaders stand up and say, we're going to have 100% literacy in America in this decade, and we're going to have top 3 in reading and math among OECD countries in this decade? One last thing. Here's why it's important. National security, we're all worried about national security. We're losing the intellectual battle.
No doubt.
China's graduating 20 million kids, many with STEM, against our 4 every year. And global competitiveness, who's going to run our companies? Yeah. And then human rights, we worry about the cost of healthcare and SNAP. Well, if we have 70% of our population coming up that can't read, those costs are going to get greater.
So let's talk about this idea on your operating system, because I think while a good description, it kind of undersells in terms of what it can do.
Yeah.
It could change us from, as you talked about, a system that's time-based. I go from first grade to second grade, and it takes me a year regardless of if it should take 2 or it should take 2 months. This would allow a better measure of the mastery of material.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, the bell curve inherently hurts people on both sides. The smart kids get held back because they got to wait for the middle to catch up. And they get bored. And a lot of them fall out of the system because they get bored. And then the kids on the back side of the curve, they just get left out. They're relegated to special ed or fall out of the system completely.
Cost to
quit
society.
school. Yeah. And so with the technology today, we don't have to have that bell curve. We can allow kids to level up like they do in video games. And the more they learn, the faster they can get through their system and take action, take initiative. The other thing that is possible with this technology is individualized learning.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the way I describe it. We're all afraid of AI. We say, oh my gosh, the machines are going to eat us, blah, blah, blah. But AI gives us the opportunity, just like machine learning, elevated machine learning, because it keeps learning from itself faster and faster. Why? Because it individualizes that distribution of content and learning. If we take that same approach to humans, we can virtually eliminate learning disabilities, because the content can be delivered based on the way the child is responding to it and best learning it. And one could argue that the assistance of this new technology could elevate human learning at levels we've never seen.
Well, and a lot of it, Jim, is scale.
Yeah.
As you said, if I'm in one of the 13,000 school districts, the sort of things that you're talking about, they're unreachable. I can't afford it, et cetera. But you've talked in different settings where I've heard by doing it at scale, I could literally take or make available. Every 5th grader can watch a brain surgery this morning from UT Southwestern.
Mm-hmm.
They could also then talk to astronauts up in the space station this afternoon. It allows that sort of learning to go on to kind of push us to new horizons.
Absolutely. Tom, there are so many, as you know, there are so many advantages of scale. Once you've got this technology in place, and I'll give you another one. Why do we do scholarships at the end? Right? Because I had to write a check. I'm not going to write a check for 20 cents. But in this world, and in the world of technology, we can distribute that $10,000 check in 20-cent increments and give you an incentive to pass a test. And then you build your account. Now, actually, Trump just helped us because he created the Trump account.
Yeah.
Every kid's going to have $1,000. Why don't we allow them to add to that? I'd love to see us get to the point where a kid says, instead of working for McDonald's this summer, I'm going to stay in and go online and level up, because I can earn as much by passing tests online and add to my scholarship account as I could earn at $10 an hour at McDonald's.
And from a cost standpoint, a lot of people would jump up and say, well, Jim, we spend $1 trillion on education already. Don't get our money's worth, and you're going to put more money into it. But the reality is, if you do some things like that, you actually cut costs. Yeah. Teachers, we don't need the teacher time spent if somebody's motivated on their own and doing those sorts of things. They may get through the material a lot quicker. They can go on to new materials, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways that, going back to what you just told us about the 7-Eleven and the
Oh, yeah.
Blockbuster days to really get the cost down by being smart in that technology.
Huge savings and efficiencies. Think of the paperwork and the redundancy.
Oh, yeah.
People ask all the time, why are public schools so expensive? Well, look at the way we operate and the redundancy in the paper still in our system today that could all be eliminated.
Well, and I think what's so fascinating too is I had significant learning differences growing up. And so I was not kind of a normal kid. And, I was still privileged to go to private school and had the resources and opportunity to have a different style of learning. But 90+% of kids don't have that opportunity I had.
Right.
And so I think listening to you talk about, hey, you can kind of formulate the material to go in and be akin to how that student takes it in.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge deal in today's society that I just don't think has been talked about at all. And so I really appreciate that.
Great point.
We know the tools are there. We've shown that
Yeah.
dyslexia, no problem with the right
Absolutely.
tools. Even autism, there are electronic tools today that are helping the autistic child learn at a pace they've never been able to before. So absolutely, these are all the tools exist today. What is lacking, sadly, is we're down in the trenches worrying about problems and blaming issues. And I don't see anybody looking at the vision of what's possible and having the ability to overcome the fear. There's a lot of fear. Oh my gosh, digital, scary, I don't want my kids on those devices. And the reality is those devices can be really lit up.
You and I were on a panel, and it was funny when it was said, but it's really the tragedy. It was an individual that was relating an 8th grader, had been a star student, Dean's List, et cetera, all the way through. And the mother had kind of watched all the successes and the awards come home. And in 8th grade, she asked the kid to read her something. He couldn't read.
Do it. Mm.
That's the real tragedy that's in our system. Jim, to wrap us up on this topic, tell us what you're trying to do to get implementation. You've been engaged with businesses. You've been engaged with governmental groups.
I have.
Governors. You've been in Washington. Give us a feel and give us some sense of optimism that we might be actually do something big in this country.
Yeah, I started with the White House and I said, we've got a new administration. The popular trend is to push education down to state and local government. My approach is different, that if you want to eliminate the Department of Education, that's fine. My recommendation was repurpose it instead. But if you don't want it to be in the Department of Education, that's fine. We can still accomplish this if we get the president to stand up and say, this is our goal. We're going to do this, and here's how. And bring together the right technologists. I didn't get very far. I got a couple of meetings with the Secretary of Education, and while I believe she embraces the idea, I think the political climate right now is not conducive to federal anything at this moment. But her recommendation was go to the National Governors Association. If we get some governors to embrace this, then maybe we can bring this up from the states. I just need enough critical mass to.
And you've spoken to the governors.
And I've spoken. I'm working on getting in front of the Governors Association in their meeting, upcoming meeting in D.C., and hopefully give them this rationale that this is something that's fixable. The next step, if I can't get that done, there are private school systems. The Catholic schools represent the largest private school network in the country. I can get with them. A third path I'm going down is individual tech companies to try to get a consortium of tech companies to come together and say, well, let's just build it, and they will come. That's a little harder path because, as you know, companies have their own turf and
own way of doing things.
Yeah.
Well, as I said when I started out, Kyle, Jim's got an impressive business background, but I really think of him as a servant leader. Through all of these decades, and you just saw over the last couple of minutes, his dedication to education when he could have done a lot of fun things.
Ridden off to the sunset.
And not get back into it. Ridden off in the sunset's a good way to put it. He didn't do that.
Yeah.
I should have also said he's a Renaissance man. He is a flyer. He's got his own jet and flies as a solo in his own jet. He is a noted sculptor and painter. So this is a guy that has enormous qualities and really benefiting society. Jim, we sure appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, guys.
Jim, it was fun.
I appreciate it, and look forward to continuing the conversation. I appreciate your support all these years. Tom has been a huge advocate for education and everything we've been doing.
Well deserved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Again, today's episode is sponsored by Clay Cooley Automotive, a family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years.